Welcome back to what you could consider the new academic year for our meditation center. And as many familiar faces, but a special welcome also for those who are new today as well. Generally on a Thursday evening, we have a little bit of a longer meditation, 45 minutes, but before we come to that part, I will go back over the basics of meditation for those who are new. And then after the meditation, then we have a chance to explore some more subject matter from the Buddhist scriptures, which happens to be about putting temptation behind us. So, meditation is probably something that you have heard great things about. A lot of the time, people see meditation as a antidote to everything that is out of balance in their life. But meditation deals specifically with a part of ourselves which you might call your awareness or the focus of your attention, something that tends to be pulled away to the many distractions that are always competing for attention in our lives. Most of those distractions are things around us. So whenever we are distracted by something, it pulls our awareness away from where we are to those things around us. And if we're not careful, or if we don't know about meditation, then our awareness gets so caught up in those things that it's very hard to find a way back again. So meditation helps to counteract this by giving us a way to reposition the center of our awareness within the body instead of it being outside. And there's a special place where, if it's possible to relocate our mind, it's particularly efficient both for calming the mind down and also for reducing the number of thoughts in the mind. And the place you can see marked on the diagram is a place you might otherwise know as your solar plexus or the center of your diaphragm, somewhere in the general area of your stomach. But it also is the center of gravity for our body as well. So if body and mind are in balance at this point, then it's particularly effective for calming down the mind and reconnecting with a sense of peace inside ourselves. You don't need to be too specific about the actual place inside there. It's a general idea, but anywhere within ourselves which feels relaxing for us generally will be effective as the focal point for our meditation. There are different ways of working with the mind because the mind itself is not something we can see directly, but what we can see is the objects within the mind. And wherever those objects are, then that is where the mind will be as well. I just came across a new word from psychology, interoception, which means that the mind is rather like one of our senses, but instead of being directed externally, it's directed inside of ourselves. So what it sees is what's inside us, not our inner bodily organs, but rather the imaginary objects we create in the mind. So if you were, for example, to think of a picture of the sun shining, can you think of that? Yes? Something bright, something orange, maybe even a smiley sun. And if the picture you see is somewhere within the space of your body, especially at that place marked on the diagram, then your mind will follow to that place as well. It will be wherever you perceive that inner object. So far so good? If your mind wanders away from there, then you just bring it back again to the picture. If the picture disappears, you can conjure up a new one. But the thing which the picture within the mind, and it might be more of a feeling than a picture, it can be for some people, the thing it tells you about the mind is firstly where the mind is located, so it's wherever you see the picture. Secondly, how good is your concentration span. So the longer you can maintain that inner picture, then the longer is your concentration span. And you gradually train the mind to build up a sense of staying with one thing at the center of yourself. Very good. Some people compete with additional hindrances as they are meditating, and one of these is having a lot of thoughts coming up in the mind. If you do have a lot of thoughts in the mind, you can try ignoring them, and generally that will allow them to settle down. But if you have so many thoughts in the mind that they are just not budging when you ignore them, you might try the mantra which is shown on the screen, the words Samma Arahang. You don't need to say them out loud, but you hear the sound of them, and if you just leave them to their own devices. So if you are someone who suffers from an excess of thoughts, then Samma Arahang might be a mantra that is effective for you. Generally, with any meditation, we start by relaxing our body, getting a good position for ourselves. The way to put our hands together is with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand up against the thumb of the left hand, and our hands just rest in our lap. But in practice, you can rest your hands however you feel is comfortable for you. And after that, then we put our mind in a positive frame of mind and clear our mind of any mental clutter. And then we do the exercise with focusing inwardly, conjuring up some sort of inner picture, and using the mantra if necessary. So far, so good. So if you're sitting comfortably, then we'll sit for meditation now for about 45 minutes. So we'd like to start by closing your eyes very gently, adjusting your posture so that your back is very straight. So that you're breathing easily and your circulation is unimpeded. Rest your hands gently in your lap, with the right hand over the left hand, and the index finger of your right hand touching against the thumb of your left hand. If you're sitting on a meditation mat, then you'll be sitting in a half lotus position. If you're sitting on a chair, then it's best to be on a straight-backed chair. As long as you're not going to fall asleep halfway through, then the meditation should go successfully for you. And we follow our breath deep down inside the body, while scanning down through the whole of ourselves, relaxing each and every muscle as we go. So starting with the muscles of our forehead, we relax any tension there. We make sure our eyes are only very gently closed, rather than closing our eyes tightly. We let the muscles of our face become soft. We relax our jaw, being particularly careful not to clench our teeth together. From there we relax our neck and shoulders, letting our shoulders drop to their natural height. Relaxing our arms, forearms, our hands and fingers, so that the way our hands rest in our lap is as light and gentle as possible. continuing on down, we relax the whole of our torso, whether it be our chest, trunk, or our abdomen. And then relaxing both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. Until we feel satisfied that no part of our body remains with any sort of stress or tension anymore. If there are places where tension still seems to linger on, then we do our best to relax that tension as far as possible. Allowing ourselves to turn our attention inward, to relax our state of mind in just the same way. But the way we relax our mind is to put aside temporarily any worries or concerns pertaining to our life. Almost as if we were sitting alone in the world, like a person with no past and no future. But entirely focused in the present moment and on the task in hand. So we conjure up a sense of well-being within ourselves, as if well-being were made up of tiny particles, particles of happiness and joy, that seem to grow and spread inside us, to fill the whole of our body and mind. Leaving no space inside ourselves for any other sort of thought. And when we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently and using no effort at all, we can imagine the whole of our body to be nothing but a hollow cavity or an empty shell. Alternately, you might prefer to think of your body as being like a transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. And within this empty space of our body, somewhere around the level of our diaphragm, is a place where the in-breath will go to the deepest point inside, before turning around to come back out as the out-breath. It's exactly the same point that we are particularly interested in as a focus for the mind. This turning point for the breath, where the breath pauses just for a moment between the in-breath and the out-breath. You can also think of this place as being like a source of peace from within. And the more we allow our awareness to familiarize itself with this point, the more the mind will start to pick up on that sense of peace and tranquility from within. All we need to do to build up that familiarity with the center of the body is to gently maintain an inner image or an inner feeling that we have conjured up at that point. Maybe a picture such as that of the shining sun I mentioned earlier, or anything bright and clear, a diamond, a star, a full moon, whatever comes easiest to us. And maintaining this inner object in this way, the mind will gradually find its equilibrium as it rests gently at the center of the body. The point inside ourselves has some special qualities. It seems to be the source of peace from within ourselves. Sometimes it even feels like the source of all that is alive inside us. And certainly it has the quality of always being bright. And our subjective feeling, our sense of interoception, can pick up on that brightness as we train the mind. But the way we can approach that ability to pick up on the inner brightness is by concentrating more on the inner feeling, on what we feel rather than asking questions why. And allowing that brightness to grow and spread within us, with the mind centered softly in the process of our meditation. Every time the mind is at the center of the body, it's like reconnecting with that inner spark of life. So the task of our meditation is to maintain our attention gently inside the body, allowing the mind to return to where it needs to be, to re-engage with its natural and pure state. If we get the balance just right, if we hit upon the sweet spot in our meditation, then we'll have a sense of expansion outwards from that central point. And we allow the volume of brightness to expand and enlarge outwards towards an endless horizon in all directions all around. Enlarging without limits, radiating forever outwards, amid the feeling of contentment. And although the point at the center of ourselves may remain always the brightest place, but the brightness radiates outwards without limits. It's almost like a diamond-like point of brightness at the center of a general illumination within us. Diamond-like sparkling in the center, with full moon brightness on the periphery. We allow the brightness to envelop us, while touching our attention gently at the most precious, diamond-like brightness at the center of ourselves. Sometimes in the context of Tibetan tradition we may have heard the chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, the diamond brightness at the center of the lotus. And with our meditation also, it's as if the very center of ourselves is a diamond-like point from which the lotus can gradually blossom outwards. We allow our mind to rest gently at the center of the body while remaining connected with the brightness all around. Immersing ourselves in this inner feeling, sense of serenity, youthfulness. And although in the back of our mind we may be aware that our physical body has to deteriorate over time, but there's a sense of the mind always being forever young, for as long as it's in touch with this inner sparkling brightness. So we engage with that brightness more and more, magnifying, multiplying the inner light of serenity, while reminding ourselves that our time of meditation on each session should be the best time of our day. So we continue to maintain our mind at the center, gently observing the inner bright diamond sparkle at the center of ourselves for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. wandering off onto other things. Each time we realize, we simply bring our awareness back again to the center of the body as before, bringing it back for as many times as it takes to build up that sense of connectedness between our mind and that special place at the center of ourselves. If we're new to meditation, we need to be quite persistent in bringing the mind back, not being put off if it's 100 times or 1,000 times that we need to bring the mind back into place. But each time we bring the mind back, it'll become a little bit easier to keep it at the center the next time round, until having the mind in place becomes almost second nature to us. In practice, the key to keeping the mind in place is to strike the right balance, using neither too little nor too much force to keep the mind in place. Sometimes we think we need to hold on firmly to the mind to get it to do what we want. But actually we need a slightly more open-handed approach. Something similar to holding a small bird inside our hands. Hold it too tightly and it will smother the bird. Too loosely and it will slip between your fingers. But somewhere in between is a sort of happy medium by which the bird can remain safe within our cradled fingers. And it's finding this sweet spot in our meditation that is really the key to the mind being able to go deeper at the central point. If thoughts return, we do our best to ignore them. If there are too many to ignore, then we can make use of that traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up as if from that central point, with a silent but resonant quality to the sound. We continue in this way lightly and gently for a few more moments in silence until we come to time for our loving kindness meditation. continue to maintain our awareness at the center of the body the whole of the time, lightly, gently, continuously, picking up on that sense of diamond-like brightness and the enveloping moonlight around the periphery. And by placing our mind very gently at the center of that diamond brightness, we can share the brightness further outward still, for the benefit of all around us. The way we can share that inner brightness as a loving kindness is initially to allow the brightness to fill the whole of ourselves with the wish that we be well and happy, free from all suffering, with the full force of forgiveness for ourselves. From there we can allow the brightness to spread wider still to those around us, outwards into the environment around us, almost as if we were a sentinel of all that is bright and wholesome on this earth. Because if a single meditator can bring brightness and wholesomeness to our planet, you can imagine how bright and beautiful the world could become if everyone in the world reconnected with that inner light. We expand our brightness outwards, initially to the whole room in which we're sitting for meditation, and wider to the whole building, to the whole neighborhood, almost like an aura or a halo that we are extending in all directions all around. Outwards to the whole town or city, wider on the level of the borough, county, country, eventually to the whole continent and all the continents of the world. Until our brightness extends across the entire face of this planet, with a sense of compassion and forgiveness for all, no matter who or what they may be, until the brightness feels infinite, growing and expanding wider, together with its brightness throughout the world, with the wish that everyone on earth can one day reconnect with their inner light, while remaining mindful of the precious nature of this opportunity all of us have taken, in giving ourselves to reconnect, giving ourselves the chance to reconnect with that inner brightness for ourselves. So we continue to gently maintain the mind at the center, harnessing that inner diamond brightness and spreading it outwards as the full moon brightness, as far as we can for the last few moments of our meditation practice in silence. Sapphe Buddha Balapada Pajekanan Yam Balang Arahantanan Te Jena Rakam Bandami Sapaso Sappaputtanupavena Sappadhammanupavena Sappasankhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. Not feeling too rusty from a month away. And for those who are new, something to focus on inside, I hope. Yeah? Ish? Something like a picture inside or a feeling inside that you could focus on? Oh, okay. Well, dark is also good. You can work with something dark. It's also a picture. You can see the darkness clearly then. Well, there you go. It's different for every person, you see. So it's a question of working with what you have. So I can lead meditation for the sort of the idealized practice, but in a sense, everyone makes of their practice something of their own. They make it their own. So what your own personal imagery will be, that is down to each person. So you take what you have and then you work with that. And it will gradually evolve on its own given time. Yeah? So a good start then. Yes. So turning gently towards the subject matter for the Dhamma talk today. What I've been doing with a sort of series of talks I've been giving is working gradually through a series of practices and what are known as blessings from a particular scripture in Buddhism known as the Mangala Sutta. And it is sometimes described as having 38 blessings. And as we have reached number 19 today, then you notice that we are about halfway through. Another way of describing the blessings within that is to put them into little subgroupings where you have 10 levels which you're working through. And again, we are about halfway through because we have already dealt with 5 of those groupings of the 10, and we move on to number 6 today. And it's sort of fitting that we are restarting the classes at this point because from now on in the talks I'm giving, the emphasis is a little bit different as compared with what has gone before. Up until this point, we've always been dealing with our habits, overt habits in our lives, the sort of things which we're dealing with in everyday life. But from this point onwards, it tends to get a little bit more internal, where we're dealing with the qualities in our mind or the virtues within the mind itself. And this will continue from this blessing 19 all the way up to number 38. And generally the way I present the topics are that I spend 2 sessions on each. So we get the first half of blessing 19 today, which is entitled Abstaining from Unwholesomeness, or to make it a little bit more sort of relevant to everyday life, putting temptations behind us. But what we find in this particular grouping is that we start with abstaining from unwholesomeness, then we deal with restraint from drinking intoxicants, and then the last one is non-recklessness in the Dharma. So the sort of temptations we are dealing with today are temptations without physical dependency. Next time, two sessions time, blessing 20 is more on intoxicants, which you can characterize as temptations which include some sort of physical dependency. And then the last one is to do with making full use of the Dhamma teachings available to us. So, what we know about the mind, especially having meditated, is that the mind is fickle, easily changed. A person who has all the best of intentions today can easily relapse into bad behavior tomorrow if their mind has not been cultivated to the point where it is steadfast. So once we realize that the mind has this sort of weaknesses, it implies that we have to upgrade our mind continuously towards something better. And one day, if we're really lucky, if we want to get beyond the point of slipping back anymore, then we have to reach a certain sort of landmark in our spiritual practice. And within Buddhism, this is sometimes known as the point of stream entry, the Sotapanna attainment, which is known as an initial degree of enlightenment. And if you haven't reached that point, then we can never fully trust our own mind that we're not going to someday slip backwards. Sometimes it's compared to climbing up a tree. And most trees have got no branches right at the bottom, right? You have to get quite a lot way up the trunk before you get to your first branch, which you can cling onto and be sure that you're not going to slip back anymore. And the equivalent of that in our meditation practice is getting to the first branch of the Sotapanna, or the stream entry attainment. Or failing that, at the very least, to get to the point where we have some sort of inner body of enlightenment, or Dhammakaya, which will sort of take care of our sense of conscience for us. And if we make no effort, well, we can just slide straight back down the tree trunk. And unfortunately, although we have lots of great intentions to be a better person and do great things for the world, there are lots of other things which can sort of distort our good intentions into things which will make our life much more unsatisfactory. And sometimes I've talked about these as gremlins, these little things in our mind, in our physical makeup, which sort of have got it in for us. If we didn't try to do anything good in our lives, then they would leave us right alone. But with all our good intentions and efforts, then we make ourselves a target for these gremlins, demons in our lives that tend to sneak up on us and make sure that no good deed goes unpunished. Yes. So the weaknesses of our mind, or kilesa-mara, the weaknesses in our body, or khandha-mara, any damage to our reputation, or abhisankara-mara, troublemakers, or devaputta-mara, and death, or the fear of death, machu-mara. And if we don't make any effort, then our whole life is like being a puppet to these ones pulling the strings for us. Because generally left to our own devices, we tend to do the easy thing rather than the noble thing. But at this point in the cultivation of blessings, really we should have gone beyond that, where we are now looking to do only the noble thing rather than the easy thing in our lives anymore. So the sort of thing which they tend to put in our way in order to get us to revert to our old ways of thinking are collectively known as temptations of various sorts, to sort of lure us back into our old and easy ways of doing things instead of doing the best thing or trying to upgrade ourselves at every opportunity. So at this point in the blessings, we try to draw the line under any unwholesomeness or to turn away from any temptations that are put in our path. In the previous blessings, we might have considered it still to be a work in progress, but at this point, we try to keep ourselves at a point where we're not going to succumb to any of those sort of temptations anymore. So at this point, hopefully, the demons we're dealing with should no longer be serious ones, not on the level of like cheating on a spouse or shoplifting, but to be called unwholesomeness, it must still be fairly serious, maybe on the level of like flirting, or being a shopaholic, or skipping off work early, or succumbing to cheesecake when you're supposed to be on a diet. And here I'm not talking about things like alcohol, because we'll come back to that specifically in number 20. And I'm also going to not deal with the Christian approach to dealing with temptation, where it tends to be thought of as more singular or demonic. But to give Christians credit where it's due, they do seem to have a lot of expertise in this department, which we can also learn from. Nonetheless, I will stick to insights from Western psychology and counseling, which in the initial section today will deal with the sort of grosser forms. And quite a lot of life hacks are available for us to learn from. And later on, after we've looked at these ones, then we can go a little deeper, a little more into the subconscious side of temptations from the Buddhist point of view. So today we will look at the sort of life hacks which can help us to deal with the grosser side of temptations. And examples of the sort of situations I'm talking about, it's where you feel the pull of a temptation. It might be a scenario of a guy sitting at a singles bar and being careful not to look about too much in case he catches the eye of any woman, which might spell trouble for him. And instead of succumbing, he finishes his Diet Coke and heads home to his loving fiancée. Or maybe Diet Coke, yes. Otherwise, yes, he'd be get it in the neck in blessing number 20, yes. Or a lady going strong at 3 weeks into her diet with 5 pounds down and no delicious decadent desserts or calorie-ridden snacks at this point. But tonight, the cravings threaten to ruin all her good work because she's at her favorite restaurant celebrating a friend's promotion, and all she can think about is the restaurant's famous chocolate lava cake. But in this case, she gives in and indulges in the mouth-watering dessert. So, if you are prepared for temptations, the idea is that you would be more able to overcome the ones you need to than if you are unprepared. So, as scary as they may seem, it's a lot easier to resist if you have some idea what to expect. So, most of the 10 ways I'll deal with today are things that you can do to circumvent trouble if you know what your temptations are. So, the sort of ones we're talking about are recognizing potential triggers, staying away from risky situations, avoid giving yourself a choice, making concrete plans, enlisting a buddy, using technology, building skills through practice, and only occasionally indulging yourself. So let's see what we can do in this department. First piece of advice to avoid temptations is to recognize the potential triggers. Because it's mostly about self-control, then tempting situations are often situations where you're going for immediate gratification instead of thinking about long-term goals. So let's say if you're on a diet, you might be tempted to eat the cheesecake that's beckoning at you from the deli case. So immediate gratification would lead to giving in, but thinking about a long-term goal would be to avoid those sort of foods. If you know what's likely to trigger you, then you can try to avoid the situation. Maybe old flames turning up in your life. You can avoid the situation by meeting in a public setting, for example. Or if you think about your long-term plans at work, then maybe sneaking out early on a Friday afternoon is not a good idea, because it might not seem like a great big deal to you, but your boss is going to notice, and eventually you're going to be written off as someone who can't be trusted with responsibility. So, long-term thinking. Second piece of advice, stay away from risky situations. If you know what's going to trigger you, then out of sight, out of mind may help you. Say you're on a diet, then maybe the first thing you need to do is to chuck out everything, the remnants of everything that's likely to tempt you off your diet, so that you don't have a handful of crisps every time you walk past the pantry, or a spoonful of ice cream every time you walk past the freezer. If it's significant others who you're likely to cheat on, then maybe just have a family email instead of a personal one, or have a profile picture with your partner and child displayed. Yes. You might also try visualizing yourself avoiding your pet temptation, like a little rehearsal. You might picture yourself noticing or touching the tempting thing before putting it back and walking away. Not convinced? Like chocolate bar, whatever. But this would not work for intoxicants, generally speaking. Yeah. And you can avoid giving yourself a choice. Remove a choice from the equation. In Thai, they have a funny expression, not letting down the drawbridge of your castle. Didn't get that one? If you got your castle, it's like easy to defend when the doors are up, right? But the moment you let down your drawbridge, then you expose yourself to risk. Yes. So if you know that you are not your diet, then try to avoid the holiday parties with sweets and rich food. And you can make concrete plans, like, I will replace cheesecake with an apple at every opportunity. No? I think we have a lot of cheesecake fans here. Okay. But if you frame it in terms of if-then, then it will be helpful to you. You can also enlist the help of a buddy who is not subject to the same temptation, to act as a sort of sponsor to keep you to your commitment. Obviously, you need to be honest for this to work. If you're still in denial, then it won't work. And if you ask your partner or buddy to help to remind you when they see you being sort of umming and erring about whether to go for it, then that's usually quite effective. And you can also, even if they are into the same sort of workout regime or whatever, you can even compete with them to see who can do better instead of putting all the focus on negative things. Number 7 these days, you can make use of available technology. For example, use budgeting software to monitor your spending. Or if you're watching your weight, have a phone app that keeps tabs on what you're eating or your weight, or an app with a graph. And it might be able to point out things you didn't know before, like, for example, you tend to eat more or overindulge at the weekends. And build up your skills through practice or rehearsal. For example, you might try saying no to easy things, like to sort of build up those muscles first of all. Like, for example, just sort of change your routine slightly. For example, if you usually brush your teeth starting on the right, then start on the left and remind yourself to keep doing that, to bring a sense of awareness back into life, which you can then apply to more serious things. Or you can get yourself to wake up a little earlier each day so that you can have a proper breakfast instead of donuts. Yes. So you build up these self-control muscles. And last but not least, you may indulge yourself occasionally. Obviously not good for intoxicants or shoplifting, but generally you tend to crave what we can't have. So the more unavailable or forbidden it is, the more we obsess about it. So the trick is to allow yourself certain things in moderation. A cheat meal now and then, for example, if you're on a diet. But you shouldn't do that 2 days in a row. Okay. And if, despite your best intentions, you are still confronted by your pet temptation, then you ought to have a plan for distracting yourself, or just simply walk away. And suggestions for distracting yourself are watching Netflix all day. Maybe you develop a new set of temptations, I don't know. Or just go out and jog. Yes. So you have your distraction plan in place. So in conclusion, it's not about desiring something that's often not right or not good for you. Because they can, giving into something in the short term leads to problems in the long term. It also leads you to feel guilty or upset or value yourself less in the long term. So it's better to resist them upfront if you can. Turning more to the Buddhist way of looking at these things, so we've called unwholesomeness temptations here, but in truth it goes a little bit deeper than just temptations, because it is anything that detracts from the quality of our mind. It's just saying that up front, it probably is too nebulous to really focus on how that might affect you in life. The actual word that's used for this in the scriptures is the word papa, which has a much broader scope of meaning than just temptation. It can refer to unfashionable things like sin and evil and wickedness. But these tend to be rather unhelpful to us, generally speaking, because they just imply a lot of judgment, and rather than indicating a way to fix the problem. So just as the sort of etymology of this word papa also implies malfunction, so as in malfunction of the mind, so it's like your mind is not working at full efficiency when it's under the influence of this thing. So when the mind malfunctions, it takes on unpleasant qualities, like cruelty or impurity or just diminished quality. So anything that detracts from quality of mind could be referred to as unwholesome, or this papa word, which we are trying to avoid in this blessing. And what does it do to your mind? Well, it does all the opposite things of what merit does to your mind. You know about merit? Warm, fuzzy feeling in the mind. When you do something good, you feel good inside yourself too. Well, giving into temptation does all the opposite things to your mind. If you can imagine that sort of getting a sort of a heavy coating of gunk in your mind that prevents your mind from working fully. Yeah? So what actually does it do? It causes clouding of the mind. So on the level of the mind itself, instability, inflexibility, diminished radiance, reduced potential, faulty decision-making, and lack of thoroughness. If you let that spread out to the level of your personality, then it will lead to things like clumsiness, grosser sort of tastes and values in life, character flaws, insensitive speech, impatience, lack of self-control, and anxiety. Further outwards onto the level of lifestyle, it causes failure or condemnation, misfortune, disappointment. And on the level of society, if everyone's doing it, then collective sorrow, disharmony, injustice, conflict, social stagnation, and hardship. So what we are dealing with here, the word papa, they offer two solutions, one of which is arati, which means giving it up. The second one is virati, which is not picking up any new ones. So avoiding stuff that's bad from your past, not picking up anything new that you haven't already picked up before. So, Buddhist strategies for gross unwholesomeness. And we're going to deal with gross, medium, subtle. But medium and subtle I'll talk about more next time. Ways to deal with gross unwholesomeness would be the things generally covered by the precepts. So the precepts would be the main antidote to deal with killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying. Apart from that, we also have this category of what are known as roads to ruin, 6 of them: alcohol, roaming the streets at unseemly hours, which is a euphemism for, come on, you can remember something surely, visiting red light districts, basically. I need to explain what red lights are. Okay, it's what they have when you don't have mini roundabouts, yes. Obsession with entertainment or sport. For example, people who play video games all day and all night also is a road to ruin. Or gambling, lotteries. Associated with bad company, especially people who do all the above, and laziness generally. So, gross unwholesomeness to avoid. Precepts I've mentioned as a way to overcome these gross unwholesomenesses in one's life. And to give a little bit of a reminder, going back to blessing number 9, precepts are not the only way to overcome these sorts of problems, but they are generally the most reliable for those who aren't yet enlightened. There is also a way of just using your conscience, which means take each situation as it arises. So if you come across a situation, then you just use your hopefully accurate conscience to decide what to do in that situation. That would be known as situational avoidance, or sampata virat. Generally though, because our conscience is not perfect, and sometimes we can't keep up with the situations, or we don't realize the gravity of the situation that we have found ourselves in at the time, then precepts generally are a good sort of ready-made list of things to avoid. As for those who have made their way up the tree to the first branch, then they have the luxury of a third way, which is called transcendental avoidance, or samucceta virat, which means basically once you have reached a point of purity in your meditation, which is no longer going to slip away from you anymore, then the intention to do bad things in your life no longer arises for you anymore. And you remember back to the story of Kukumita, the hunter's wife, who laid out the weapons for him every morning, but had no intention that they would be used for anything unwholesome, because she had already attained that stream entry. So generally, the precepts are the main way to overcome the gross sorts of unwholesomeness or temptations in life. Today I'll finish off with a quick story. It's one of transcendental avoidance of gross unwholesomeness. During the time of the Buddha, many people had no education or real worldly knowledge at all. So many were completely illiterate and belonged to the lowest of professions in that caste system. But they had a good fortune to be around at a time when they had the chance to learn something directly from the Buddha. And because of being contemporary to the Buddha, they were able to attain that first branch of the way up the tree, or stream entry. And one such person was a guy called Arya. And the name Arya, any idea what it means? Arya Satya. Arya. It basically means noble, or a noble one. Yeah, Arya. So this guy's name was Mr. Noble, okay? But he happened to be a fisherman through probably no fault of his own. And he lived at the same time as the Buddha. And basically, because he was a fisherman, then his livelihood involved breaking the first precept every day. And one day, when the Buddha was meditating early in the morning, into his meditation arose the picture of Mr. Arya fishing. But the Buddha realized that this guy had the potential for enlightenment, if only he could be persuaded to do otherwise. So he would be able to attain that stream entry if the Buddha was able to intervene. So that day the Buddha went to where he was needed, and with all his other fellow monks he went along the shoreline to where Mr. Arya was fishing. And when he saw the Buddha coming from a distance, he became ashamed and hid his fishing rod. And when the Buddha arrived on the scene, he didn't talk immediately to Mr. Arya, but he turned around and he started asking each of the monks what their name was. So he made a show of asking Sariputta what his name was, and Sariputta said Sariputta. And then the Buddha went down the line of monks asking the monks, what is your name? What is your name? And overhearing the conversation, the fisherman started to ask if he's going to ask me my name. And sure enough, when he'd finished asking all the monks, he turned to the fisherman and he said, what's your name then? And he said, my name is Arya, or Mr. Noble. And in fact, the Buddha didn't need to be told the man's name. He worked it all out in advance, how he's going to hold this conversation with the guy. And the Buddha said that anyone who still harms living beings could not really be considered to live up to the name noble on account of their actions. And he said that one's nobility comes not from not harming living beings. And just hearing those words, Mr. Noble, or Mr. Arya, he attained stream entry, and from that time on, he never had the inclination to kill living beings ever again. So probably went to sell carrots or something instead. Yes. Because he transcended the very intention to kill from that time onwards. Yeah. So this is one example of the transcendental way of overcoming the inclination to do what one is tempted to do. To finish off with some publicity for today, I would like to encourage any of you who found meditation useful today, or at least have some potential, to practice further using the meditation technique you learned today, maybe just for 20 minutes at home if you can each day, early in the morning, lasting at night, depending on when you are likely to have the most peaceful time, uninterrupted time to meditate. And little by little, you will accumulate the familiarity with the center of the body in a way that you can go further and faster in your meditation each day. Some days may be harder, some days may be easier, but if you keep going anyway, then on aggregate, then you'll see some progress in your meditation little by little. If you forget how to meditate, there is always the MindGem app for that, which you can download onto your mobile phone and hear meditation instruction, which you can follow along with and even time yourself meditation as well. Usually this will work well for about 7 days, and then the sort of inclination to meditation goes the way of all other temptations and will wear off, at which point you can come back and join one of our classes, which are now up and running again. Tuesday is a slightly shorter meditation, 30 minutes. Every Thursday, a slightly longer meditation, 45 minutes, with a Dhamma talk each time. And the monks here take it in turns to give the teachings. Apart from that, we have the remnant of the pandemic teachings every Saturday still throughout Europe, the DMEU classes between 7 and 8 p.m. each day on British time, and the Zoom coordinates are there for anyone who's interested. But sometimes it's good to meditate from the comfort of one's home, and also you get to meet up with lots of interesting European meditators as well, and lately some Brazilians and Americans as well. I don't know how they manage it time-wise. Coming up on Saturday, the 10th of September, it's Full Moon Day, and this time round we'll have a little celebration in person, also online as well, between 7 and 8:30. It also happens to be the day our founder of our tradition, the monk you can see in the gold there, he was able to attain the inner body of enlightenment for the first time. So we have mentioned him for sure as well. So Harvest Moon and Founders Day. And for those who aren't already aware, we have a meditation retreat coming up in mid-September, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, finishing in the afternoon here. So you can sleep here, right or left. And some people said if you're afraid of snoring, you can bring your own tent. Yes, the weather is still warm enough for that, and all at the very reasonable price of only £75 for the weekend. So if you are undergoing a cost of living crisis, then you may find it cheaper to come and keep 8 precepts at the temple than it is to heat your home for that weekend. 8 precepts. So no evening meal, but yogurts are allowed, yes. So that's all I have for you this evening, but if there are any questions, comments, feedback at this point, I'd be very pleased to hear from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you're very welcome to ask our teaching monk Louise any questions afterwards if you want to do that. For the moment, maybe we pray together in respect to our teaching monk Louise, background and returns bow. Bow. Bow.
So may you all enjoy happiness, success and prosperity in life, and be strong-minded in the face of all temptations now and forevermore.